Hello everyone, Joel Millington here, and you're tuned in to the Caribbean Mentors podcast, where you will be getting insightful tips from real-life experts from the Caribbean. This is the podcast for every person who wants to see their career explode. This is episode number 97 of the Caribbean Mentors podcast. Greetings everyone and welcome to the Caribbean Mentors podcast. I'm your host, Joel Millington, and it's my pleasure to be bringing you another wonderful discussion I had with one of our mentors from the Caribbean. I'm also really excited because we are quickly approaching the 100th episode and we will be taking a pause to celebrate just a little. So jump across to Facebook and like the Caribbean Mentors page so you could be part of the celebration and giveaways. Okay, that's it. So let's jump right into our interview for today. Our special guest and Caribbean mentor has a wealth of experience in higher education administration, an in-depth knowledge of curriculum development, and a passion for facilitating student success. She holds a doctorate in higher education administration and a master's degree in education from Teachers College, Columbia University, New York, an MBA in French from the University of South Carolina, and a BSc in French and Spanish from Georgetown University. Today, she serves in the position of President of the College of Science, Technology, and Applied Arts of Trinidad and Tobago, COSTAATT. Ladies and gentlemen, Caribbean Nation, let's meet Dr. Gillian Paul. Hi, Dr. Paul. Welcome to the program. Thanks for accepting the invitation. It's a pleasure to have you here with me today.
Thanks for inviting me, Joel.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Paul, we are going to have a quick conversation regarding your career journey, and the audience would know by now that I start with all the mentors the same way. Tell me about your childhood. Give us a little insight into before you were Dr. Paul.
Okay. Well, I actually always loved learning. It's a big joke in my family that when I was 5 years old, as a matter of fact, before I was 5, I was fighting with my aunt and grandmother to let me go to school, and that I had the biggest book bag.
Okay.
So that the book bag was actually as tall as I was, and I couldn't have it on my shoulder. I used to carry it on my forehead and trudge to school with all my storybooks, reading, because reading is what I really loved from a very, very, very early age. And I've never lost the habit and the love of reading. So anywhere that I go, I would always have a book with me, just in case I had to wait, I could get a chance to read.
Right.
Including sometimes going to church, which would cause a lot of drama.
What do you think's created that love for reading?
Well, my mother was a voracious reader.
Okay.
And my aunt is a primary school teacher. And then my grandmother, who probably did not go to school in the way that we went to school, she read the newspapers from end to end. So my entire childhood, my father, everyone, there was reading in the house all the time.
Yeah.
Papers, storybooks, novels, reading central to my whole journey.
Right. Now it's TV and tablet and games and Xbox.
I have to confess that the tablet doesn't feel like a book to me.
Okay.
And I'm old school with that. I love the feel of a book in my hands.
Excellent. What primary school and secondary school did you attend?
I went to Tacarigua EC primary school up until standard 4. Then I transferred to Holy Name Prep School on the advice of the principal, who felt I needed to be challenged a little more.
Okay, so this is a question that I also like to ask because the demographic of listeners, I want to give them an insight. How did you choose your direction? So when Form 5 is over or Form 6 is over and you have to enter, quote unquote, into the world now, you have to decide, am I going to university? Can I even afford university? Can my parents afford that? Am I going to work? So tell us a little bit about that part of your life here.
Okay, so I would say up until Form 3, I was doing pretty well in all subject areas.
Okay.
And I had maybe teachers tugging me in different directions, some to do languages. People were telling me you should go and do law. I was still pretty good in science.
Yeah.
I didn't have such a happy math experience, though, which I think your listeners would empathize with. And in Form 3, I really started to get trouble with math, to the point where my mother had to send me for math lessons.
Okay.
Which I did grudgingly, but I was very lucky because I had one of the brilliant math lessons teachers that we have all over the Caribbean who can make math seem so understandable. It's like magic.
Okay.
So I managed to scrape through math in CXCs, but certainly I have to say that I fell in love with language. And my father, who went to QRC and was also the recipient of an exhibition, he sort of fed my love for languages, because they did in those days in QRC, you did French and Greek and many languages, and he kept it alive. So I remember childhood memories of him singing O Tannenbaum for me in German, and sometimes he would speak in French, and it was like a mystery thing, so that it was something that we shared, that we could speak to each other. My brother and my mom were not into the languages, so it was really, I think, a kind of expression of a special bond that I had with my dad, that I really pursued the languages. Mm-hmm. And then I decided, because remember, I'm reading all the time.
Right.
And that I just said, I want to be a translator. I want to be an interpreter. I want to work in the UN. I like this sort of international life, and had made up my mind that that's what I wanted to do. But I didn't even have a thought of how I was going to get to university, because I also loved literature. I did art. So I was just really enjoying school. Mm-hmm. And then in sixth form, because as I said, I did okay, not like today's students who get 21 C6. I think I did okay enough to get into A-levels. And in A-levels, I maintained the languages. But it was an interesting combination, because I actually insisted that I should also do art, because I loved art. I loved painting. So I had a very different combination. And I had a literature teacher who told me, maybe you should be in advertising, because it was a kind of marriage of the words and the images. And I like that. And then in sixth form, one of my teachers came to me and said to me, that you could win a scholarship.
Okay.
And nobody had ever said that to me before. Yeah. I wasn't even paying attention to that. I was there just loving school. And she said, your French is very strong, but you need to work on your Spanish, and I'm going to work with you. Wow. And she kind of opened up this whole possibility of university, because my parents knew that I was a very willful child, in that I was determined to do languages. And in Korea, the teachers would be saying she could do medicine, she should do law, she likes to, and they would just roll their eyes and say, you really don't know Gillian. She says she wants to do languages. Just leave her alone. She's going to do languages. So then I ended up getting this scholarship. But the scholarship came as a surprise, because after I did A-levels, I listened to my inner self, and I ended up getting a lovely job in McCann Erickson as a copywriter. Okay. My first job was as a copywriter. And at the time, McCann Erickson still is one of the best advertising agencies, but they had huge accounts. So they had BW, they had Royal Bank, Bata shoe stores, some heavy-hitting accounts. Carib. So those in those days. And I had the privilege, I would say, of working with one of the best account directors in Ken Eustace, the brother of Teddy Eustace. That was an education for me, and Tommy Lee. And I found out about the scholarship after I was working in McCann. Okay. So I actually left to go away to study. And I was in my mind thinking I would love to go to Geneva, where the premier school for translation and interpretation is located. Right. And that's where I was heading, and that's where I applied. So I want you to understand my career is very ziggy-zaggy. Yeah. And at the time, my brother was studying in Howard University, and we went to visit him before I went away to Europe. And while in Howard, they did a sightseeing of Washington, D.C., and I saw Georgetown University, and I just fell in love. And apparently, unbeknownst to me, because I knew nothing about Georgetown, they actually had an extremely good school of translation and interpretation. And that was destiny. Yeah. Because I was in my last semester doing my last class for my degree in French and Spanish in Georgetown, it's a little different in that you have to get an undergraduate degree first, and then you specialize in translation and interpretation.
Okay.
And in that last class, I decided to do a course on teaching English as a second language. It was an education elective. And that's it. I fell in love. Found my purpose.
Yeah.
Last class.
Wonderful.
Translation and interpretation. I never looked back. I have no loss of love for but it's all very abstract. Education is what I was supposed to do.
Okay, let me ask you a more social question. So you got the national scholarship. You have to go away to do your studies. You have to leave your country.
Yes.
You're going on your own.
Yes.
What was your mindset around that time? Did you, because I know some parents too, they don't want to let the child go. So from your perspective, were you excited? Were you fearful?
I was excited because I like change. I love travel. I love adventure. But I came from a very close-knit family, a very huge extended family.
Okay.
And I think that my parents were probably more comfortable with me going to Georgetown because my brother was already there. And I have to confess to you that I stayed in the dorms. And Georgetown is very famous because The Exorcist was filmed there.
Yeah.
And my dorm window looked down The Exorcist stairs. And I'm a bit of a scaredy cat.
Right.
And so it was okay when I started in September, but it got a little creepy. And then I confessed that I told my parents, would it be okay if I went to live with my brother in his apartment, that I would travel to school?
Okay, so when you were introduced, really, and as you mentioned there, you got the teaching opportunity and the love for teaching was good. Now, you could teach a host of various things. They are teaching at different levels.
Okay.
So I'm trying to determine at what point did you decide, you know what, I am going to go straight PhD. This is what I'm going to do.
Oh, that didn't happen like that at all. That's a very different journey. So let me tell you how I ended up where I ended up. So I'm a national scholar, so I have to come back and serve.
Right.
That's the agreement with the government. They fund you. And when I came back, I got my teacher registration certificate. And the first position that came up was for me to teach Spanish in Barrackpore.
Okay.
So everybody would like, but you're going to teach Spanish in Barrackpore? But they didn't know my father. My father is a kind of old world public servant. He said, that's where the government says you have to go and teach. Let's find out how to get you to Barrackpore. So remember, you graduate in May.
Yeah.
I got my teaching certificate. So I'm kind of gearing up to go to Barrackpore in September to teach Spanish. And at that time, there was an international film festival that was hosted by Niehurst. And I went to the festival with my boyfriend.
Right.
And his father. His father spoke to one of the conference organizers from Niehurst and said, you have this returning scholar and you've not offered her a job and you're letting all these scholars come back. And this is very famous story. She knows I've told it 1,000 times. This is Mrs. Maureen Manchuk, who's the president of Niehurst.
Okay.
And she looked at me and she said, but she didn't apply for any job in Niehurst. What are you talking about? And when I went home and I told my mom said, well, Mrs. Manchuk said you didn't apply. So you need to go and apply.
Yeah.
So I sent me promptly. It was a Sunday and then Monday I turned up. And Mrs. Manchuk said to me, well, I don't have any job for you, but we have the School of Languages. And if you would like to come and help out, come and help out.
Right.
And I like to tell this story because young people today, they are very focused on getting the job with a big salary right away.
Yes.
So I turned up in Niehurst. I had no job. There was no salary.
Yeah.
What Mrs. Manchuk promised me was that I would have an opportunity to use my languages because they had 2 other returning scholars who had come back from Geneva. And my mother made me dress very properly as if I had a job every day and turn up for work. And I did. And that's how my love affair with education began. So I started as an administrative cadet working in the School of Languages. And Niehurst is an extraordinary institution in terms of giving young people space and taking risks with young people to grow. And I actually was then asked by the vice president of higher education, who is another of my mentor. I call them my work mother and father, Dr. Alvin Ashton. He asked me to set up an English as a second language program.
Okay.
And that's how I was able to use my French, my Spanish, and my teaching. So I set up the ESL program at the School of Languages from beginning to end. Housing, immigration, curriculum, everything. And it is because of that experience within the School of Languages that when Nihust had the responsibility to set up COSTAATT, I was asked to be part of that process. And that's what led me to the PhD.
Okay, so tell us then, what goes into running a higher education institution? What goes into running this college, for example? Because it's not only about lecturing, you have a whole host of other administrative type things to do.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about what you do when you come to work here.
On a daily basis.
Yeah.
The degree is higher education administration, and you have to understand finance,
right,
HR, technology, curriculum, student development, facilities, procurement. Because if you have to manage it, you have to understand how all of those different areas operate together.
Yeah.
So my degree was extremely broad. I did strategic marketing, I did fundraising, I did human resource, I did technology. So on a daily basis, I can get any number of things on my desk. I can get new program proposals. I can get capital projects where we are trying to improve a facility, refurbish a facility. I can get legal matters where I am dealing with maybe a student disciplinary matter and I have to convene a disciplinary committee. I can be dealing with HR. So it's extremely broad and it's impossible to get bored. And you always have to stay up to date on what is happening in all these subdisciplines if you have a responsibility for planning and leading.
Yeah. And as you said, planning, leading, management. Another key thing that I like to find out from our leaders is, was there a point in time when you realized your leadership style? Or was it a purposeful decision where you say, you know what, this is what it is, I need to lead this group of people. So even though I'm not authoritative, for example, because I'm in this situation which probably requires me to be such, I am going to implement an authoritative style. So I try to find out, how did you discover the type of leader / manager that you will be?
Okay, so this one is a actual technical response. So one of the things that we are required to study in my degree is leadership. It's academic leadership. And there's a very powerful book that was part of my program called Reframing Organizations. I try to recommend it to many different persons because it is actually one of the most insightful studies about leading that I've actually read.
Okay.
And it's a meta-analysis. So the authors really look at leadership in all its complexity. And they're basically saying to you that, first of all, leaders have to be continually reflecting.
Right.
And they must be conscious of leadership styles and contexts. And they must understand when to deploy what we call what frame.
Yeah.
So you can have a technical rational frame, which is this is the correct thing to do. But depending on the situation, you need to deal with it from an HR frame, which is people are involved. And you have to attend to people's needs and not simply the correct thing to do. And then you have the political frame. And so the political frame is interest groups, etc. So I want to say that I try to practice what I learned in that I don't have a defined leadership style, although people who work with me might tell you very easily that I'm very authoritative and bossy. And that is possibly true.
Right.
But if I were to say where I bias towards technical rational. I'm a systems person. I like to understand what the system requires and what it needs to improve.
Okay. I want to take you back to a phrase that you said, student development.
Yes.
And I gather from that phrase that we try to develop students because we want them to have a successful career also. Is there a relationship, based on your experience in the field, is there a relationship between student success and career success? Because what I have found, sometimes because of external factors, you may not be as focused as a student, right? So I know I didn't have the best of grades as a student, but it's only like after secondary school when things start to get a little clearer for me that I started to actually focus and you realize, but wait, no, I understand this thing called schoolwork. Right. And now you have ambition that try to drive your career. So I'm trying to determine when we label
children as bright or students as bright, do we automatically expect that that is the student that will have a successful career?
Right. I am not equating student success with bright.
Okay.
Or academic success. Those are different things. So you can be a student who did not get all A's, did not get 5 C6. And if you think about COSTAATT and COSTAATT's rule, this is what we live by. But you have intrinsically understood what are the requirements for success. Persistence, goals, motivation. And there may be many factors that don't allow you to get academic success. But if you have those things within you and they are nurtured, you will achieve success independent of academic success when you are ready. So many students come to us without the magical 5 CXCs.
Right.
But they have a desire to learn. They have a determination to come to class. They have an openness to change. So there are many aspects and attributes to success that are not linked to grades.
Right.
And if you have those within you and you find yourself in the right place with the right teacher and the right support systems, you can achieve tremendous career success.
Right. So student development is not necessarily academic development.
Right. And our type of institution, we pay a lot of attention to development. And so there's a huge amount of literature on what are the things that allow for development, cognitive development, moral development, affective development. Those are separate from getting the right answer and getting A's and being considered bright. And quite often, because we teach entrepreneurship.
Right.
And we study entrepreneurship a lot at the college. And it's quite interesting to us that bright students who get all A's are not necessarily the best students for entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Because entrepreneurs need to be risk takers. They need to be able to operate without knowing the right answer.
Okay.
They need to work in ambiguity. They need to not fear failure.
Yeah.
Right. So this is what bright students do. Bright students are accustomed to positive reinforcement when they get an A and negative reinforcement when they don't.
Right.
And what that builds is I'm going to avoid anything that I don't get an A in, which means I avoid failure and avoid risk.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, this is a segment I call Roadmap, because I like to give the listening audience somebody who's interested in your field. So let me phrase it like this. If someone is to look at your career and say, Dr. Paul, I really love what you're able to achieve in your life, and I would like to achieve something similar. I like the area that you are involved in. Could you give me some tips as to what I need to focus on? Give me some little milestones that I need to achieve to plot a course similar to yours. What would you say?
Okay. First and foremost, find out what you're passionate about. Which seems very simple, but is actually not that straightforward.
Not simple at all.
And the system makes it very hard for us to sometimes embrace what we are passionate about. But in my entire experience, I've seen very few examples of persons who have achieved really great things without being passionate about something. Passion is first. And it doesn't matter if your parents or your teacher or whoever the adult is in the room saying to you, that doesn't make any sense. That career, you wouldn't get any money. And you get that sort of negative feedback. You'd be surprised that life is very long. It's going to give you a lot of challenges. But if you don't have the knowledge that every day I'm doing something that I really love doing, it's going to be very difficult for you to keep going.
Yeah.
So that would be the first thing. The second thing is you need to invest in yourself and make a commitment to acquiring training.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a degree.
Yeah.
But you must make a commitment to acquiring training, knowledge, competency in the thing that you are passionate about.
Yeah.
You can't sit down in your head and say, I'm bright. I don't know why they don't recognize. I can't get a job, boy.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's the straight road. But sometimes you don't get the thing by the straight road. So you have to be able to nurture your passion in the thing that you believe you are destined to do. And sometimes do some stuff that's not your passion in order to be able to nurture your passion.
Excellent point.
People say, I don't want that job. Well, you have to pay the bills.
Yeah.
If you would like to study and do what you're passionate about, somebody has to get the money to pay for that. If it's not funded by GATE, you have to get it. So you have to be focused and you have to be goal-oriented. But to get the success, it has to be around what you're passionate about. That's how you get sustained career development.
Well said. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mindset, because again, you spoke about when things don't go your way and the road is long. I like to ask this question also. Give me a text or a quote that you have come across that you say, you know what, this really reflects me. Yeah.
I have to tell you it's in French. Okay. So I'll say it in French and then I'll tell you where it's from and what it means.
Yeah.
It's Cultivate mon jardin. And it's from a famous novel, Candide, by the French author Voltaire. And it means cultivate your garden. It's in the last paragraph of the book. And the book is about this young man who travels all over the world with his companions and sees all sorts of terrible things. And he comes back a bit dejected because when he started, he was candid, he was idealistic, optimistic, and the world taught him some very tough lessons. And he came back at the end of the novel with his companions and basically said, I can't fix everything.
Yeah.
And the world may be a terrible place, but I'm going to grow my garden. And so you can't fix everything. And the world may be a terrible place, but trust me, if you focus on growing your garden, it'll be better.
What motivates you now at this stage?
Thinking about the next generation, thinking about making certain that what NIHUS did for me as a young professional and giving me lots of opportunities to develop and grow and acquire skills, that we put systems in place for the next generation of leaders within the college so that they have the opportunities that were afforded to me. So making certain that we do in COSTAATT what we don't do very well in the country, which is proper succession planning.
Okay, so now it's super overtime. This is where I am going to ask you 6 questions. It's nuggets of wisdom I'm looking for.
Oh my goodness, I don't know that I'm especially wise. I'll try.
Okay, let's go. If you had a time machine and you could only travel back once to give one piece of advice to your younger self, what will that advice be?
I would say get more involved in extracurricular activities.
What's the best career advice you have ever received?
Do the work.
How do you reduce stress and remain balanced?
Watching movies.
Give us a great book you would recommend reading.
Reframing organizations.
What would you consider to be your most rewarding accomplishment?
I have to say working on the construction of the Chaguanas campus, which is COSTAATT's first purpose-built campus. When we started in NIHUS, it didn't seem possible.
Right.
And I feel very proud to have been able to contribute to, so that's a kind of culmination of the work of hundreds of people towards creating this national institution.
Yeah.
And it was a point of pride to be part of the process of it's there, it's our campus, we have land. Everything else is icing on the cake.
Yeah. And if you had to start over and you could not be in languages, you could not be an academic, you could not be a teacher, what would be your alternative?
I'd be in advertising, graphic design.
Okay, Dr. Paul, we are fastly approaching the end of our discussion, and I want to tell you thanks for really taking time out of your day. We like to end the conversation on a lighter note. So I want you to give me one of your favorite songs. It's a song that once you hear it, your foot immediately start tapping.
Feels So Good by Chuck Mangione. It's jazz.
Oh.
I am a jazz lover.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Dr. Paul, again, I want to say thanks to you for taking time to share your journey with us, to give us a little insight into how things went with you, and I'll give you the honor of having the last words.
To all the listeners, everything is possible if you believe in yourself. And have faith in God. He's in charge of everything.
Excellent. Please to leave it, and we'll catch up next time.
Okay, Joel.
Okay, bye.
Well, folks, this brings us to the end of another great episode of the Caribbean Mentors podcast. Now, before you leave, let me just remind you that this coming Wednesday, we will be having a bonus episode with professional career and life coach, Mr. Anthony Hadid from YourLifePurpose.com, where we will be diving deep into the topic of career building. So be sure to look out for that episode this coming Wednesday. Also, please subscribe to the podcast so you can continue to get our great content. This is Joel Millington, and I hope you will be joining me for the next episode. Remember, let's all strive for excellence. Let's all strive to be a mentor.